Sequels can be a tricky thing. They not only have the weight of expectations of what made the first game great, but also need to improve and add more to it. That's exactly where Dark Deity 2 finds itself. While it maintains a lot of what made the original game so excellent, it also adds a lot that, at times, can make the game feel bloated. But does this ruin the experience or still make for a fun time? Let's dig in and I'll tell you all about it.
And that's everything we know. Now your turn. Tell us about the Blood Feud.
Dark Deity 2 is a direct follow-up from the original game, as you play as the children of the original game's main character, Irving. For most of the game, the actual plot, the meat of the story, is pretty vague. You belong to an order and you go around helping people. There are these vague rumblings that there's something wrong in the kingdom, like energy that just doesn't feel right to magic users, and certain animals are behaving strangely. It's kind of an interesting mystery to keep you going, but doesn't really get interesting in earnest until almost the end of the game. The game attempts to spice things up by giving you choices at various points in the story. For example, there's an army coming and you have to decide who you want to fight with as they're approaching. I didn't do all the routes, but based on what happens after the battle where I made that choice, it seems like you get different characters into your party depending on which choices you make. Now, I'm not sure if it's worth playing the entire game twice to see all the different outcomes, but I appreciated that the game added some variety to the story. But what the game lacks in a compelling plot, it more than makes up for with interesting characters. The entire story of Dark Deity 2 is now fully voice acted, which adds a lot. In the original game, I couldn't really discern one character's personality from the other, but here every character feels so distinct that now you can hear how lines are actually delivered. And while I couldn't recognize any of the voice talent, they all gave great performances and did their job well. You could really get a sense of the different characters' personalities and how they felt during different situations. The main character, Gwen, for example, puts on a strong face in front of her squad, but behind the scenes, she really feels the heavy burden of leading everyone. The fully voiced story is certainly a welcome change that adds a lot to the package overall. I will say, however, that some of the dialogue scenes felt a bit bloated. Now that the development team was working with voice talent, I felt like at times characters were talking just to talk. A handful of lines could have easily been cut to trim the fat a bit and would have made for a tighter story overall.
It had to be done.
Like any good tactical RPG, the gameplay is where it's at. The development team has clearly aimed to make Dark Deity 2 as approachable and flexible as possible for players. When you begin the game, you're given a choice between 4 different difficulties, the option to turn off limits for battles, as well as how character stats increase when they level up. Most battles require you to finish them in a certain turn limit or you automatically lose, but with this turned off, you have the freedom to complete each battle however you'd like. While turning this limitation off certainly makes the game less challenging, it also makes it way less stressful. I ended up playing with the Deity difficulty, which is the 3rd highest difficulty, turning off the turn limits and choosing linear leveling. After messing around with the difficulty for about a dozen hours or so, this seemed to be the perfect balance for me. If you're familiar with tactical RPGs like I am, I would highly recommend playing on Deity mode, or else the game's going to be way too easy. Now, if you're unfamiliar with tactical RPGs, let me break down this general structure of how the game works. It's broken up by chapters, with each chapter consisting of a bit of a story and one battle. When you begin a battle, you have a designated area where you can place your troops with a very specific goal in mind, and each battle also has sub-goals that if you complete, you'll earn extra rewards. Most battles typically ask you to either get to an exit or defeat a specific enemy. Nothing terribly creative from that perspective, but that's usually how battles in tactical RPGs work anyway. Some of the sub-goals I found really interesting and compelling and really added to the tactical aspect of each battle. For example, one of the earlier missions has you trying to escape a town that's on fire. The longer you take to finish the battle, the more the flames will engulf the map. One of the sub-objectives here is to go to various houses around the map and rescue people that are still in them. Doing that adds extra risk because to get to each house, you have to fight extra enemies and split up your party. I found these extra goals on each map super interesting and compelling. I think this is where the real genius of the game's design comes in and once again shows the team's desire to make the game as flexible as possible. For newcomers who just want to beat the game, you could easily complete each map, do the main objective, and move on, but for tactical RPG veterans like myself, there's all kinds of ways to make the game harder and more interesting so you can really play however you want. After a half dozen or so chapters into the game, Dark Deity 2 also introduces training battles and challenge battles. Training battles are simply a way to help you grind levels if you're underleveled or if any specific character is underleveled. And challenge battles make you think with all your strategy tactics in mind. For example, there was one where you absolutely needed to escape in a minimum number of turns or you lose, and it didn't matter if you had the turn limiter on or off. I really appreciated this because in tactical RPGs, it's so easy for certain characters to get underleveled and become useless, so I found myself doing these training battles every once in a while, while, whenever I had characters underleveled. I also enjoyed the extra challenge of these challenge missions because I just wanted to do everything the game had to offer. One thing I will say that bummed me out about Dark Deity 2 that they removed from the original game were these indicators during your turn. In Dark Deity 1, whenever you selected a character, enemy troops had either a blue up arrow or a red down arrow, indicating whether they'd be weak to the currently selected character. For whatever reason, the development team removed this, and I really don't understand why. I always love when I have all the information at my fingertips, and so going into this one, I kind of just had to use my intuition to figure it out as the game went on. The amount of different weaknesses didn't seem as vast as in the past game, so maybe that's why they felt like they needed to remove it, but it was an unfortunate absence. As far as the actual combat and different character classes go, Dark Deity 2 is really compelling in very unexpected ways. In combat, you have a health meter, but then you also have this blue meter that essentially serves as MP or action points. Each turn you'll recover a little bit, which makes for a lot of fascinating tactical decisions. You could perform an ability and use most of your action points, knowing you'll recover some next turn, or do you want to just save up in case of an emergency? I found myself weighing those options quite a bit in battles. The various abilities and different character classes are also really fascinating as well. I had this rogue character that used dual daggers, and you'd think that they would be fast and hit with high critical strike chance, but funnily enough, I ended up using her as a healer more than anything else. Because her movement range was so big and was one of the few characters that could actually heal, I found her running all over the map healing characters whenever they needed it. I also had a character essentially serve as a paladin. They would stand at the front line, take a bunch of damage, but then also heal characters whenever they needed it. That might just be my weird way that I play, but I think that was intentional, and you might also find yourself using character classes in ways you might not expect. As your characters level up, their stats will obviously increase, and you'll unlock new abilities as the game goes on. But at certain intervals, your character can change classes, and while certain characters obviously stick to certain archetypes, you have a range of 4 different classes you can choose from at each stage, and you're not necessarily locked in either. To change classes, you need to spend one of these coins, and it's pretty easy to find them if you're completing all the submissions. So if you try a character in a certain class and you don't like them, you can always change later for not that bad of a penalty. One of the biggest overhauls in Dark Deity 2 has to be the equipment system. In Dark Deity 1, it had this really streamlined system for each character. Essentially, each character had one of 4 weapons that they could equip in the middle of battle, each one using various stats like high critical chance, high damage, high hit percentage, or some combination of all of them. Here in Dark Deity 2, you're constantly getting new weapons and equipping them. There's also 2 rune slots on your weapon that you can equip, and these can do anything from increasing damage, reducing the weight load on your characters, increasing critical strike chance, and much more. There's also a bit of a crafting system where you can create rings that you can equip on your characters. Characters can equip 2 rings at a time, and some of them are really interesting. For example, on my rogue, she had this ability that if she didn't do anything on her turn, then on her next turn, her critical strike chance increased dramatically. Once again, making for some very fascinating tactical choices in the middle of combat. Some of these rings are completely overpowered and make characters ridiculously strong, while other ones are just nice stat increases. Because there are so many rings and there's so many different materials you need to craft them, I kind of had analysis paralysis at some point and just said, whatever, I'll make a few, equip them on my characters, and just move on. But if you love min-maxing stats in RPGs, there's a ton of depth here for you to do some crazy stuff with. Personally, I love the more streamlined system in Dark Deity 1, but I can totally understand why some would love a system with this much depth. There's also a bit of a bonding system in this game. If characters fight close to each other in the middle of battles, their bonds will increase, and as their bond levels increase, this unlocks various rewards like different character interactions or something more tangible like money and items. Unfortunately, once again, there's no romance system in the game, but this is a nice little system for extra rewards that makes you feel extra invested in your characters.
I cannot stay here. I will not be party to this affair, knowing as I do now that there is an alternative.
From a presentation standpoint, Dark Deity 2 maintains its great pixel work while at the same time increasing the detail and qualities of other aspects of the game. I feel like the character portraits and character designs got a huge level up. I loved meeting all the different characters in the game. They all looked so cool. And I feel like the map detail also went up in this entry. Increasing the production value overall was very clearly a goal from the development team, and it shows in all aspects. The music, on the other hand, is inoffensive but also forgettable at the same time. You're not going to find yourself humming the melodies of any of these songs, but they're also not offensively bad in any way. I played this on PC, and performance-wise it ran fantastic. I didn't have any crashes, and it ran at a solid 60 frames per second from start to finish. I wouldn't necessarily call these bugs, but the game did have a few weird quirks to it. Once again, like in Dark Deity 1, when the battle starts, the cursor starts at the upper left-hand corner of the map, and you have to drag it all the way down to where your characters are. I don't understand how this bug continued from the first game. There's obviously something in the way the game is designed or the engine they're using, but I find it baffling that this bug carried over from the first game. And while the game is Steam Deck verified and runs beautifully on it, unfortunately they haven't programmed in cloud saves. So if you're like me and like to play on PC, transfer your cloud saves onto your Steam Deck and keep playing there. Unfortunately, at least when I was playing, cloud saves weren't available. Hopefully this is something that they can patch in post-release. While Dark Deity 2 has a few quirks and some design decisions I ultimately don't agree with, it's still a fantastic tactical RPG overall. It's incredibly flexible, allowing you to play exactly how you want. The characters come to life in a brand new way thanks to fantastic voice acting, and most importantly, the game maintains its strong combat and map design. The game clocks in at around 25 hours, but that's me playing on Deity mode doing all the extra content, so if you play on an easier difficulty or skip all that, you're probably looking at closer to 20 hours. If you love classic Fire Emblem or just a good tactical RPG, this is one you should definitely pick up. Now, this is one of the better modern tactical RPGs in my opinion, but if you want to see the absolute best the genre has to offer, be sure to watch this video next.